Scandal at the shopping mall. A woman in a wheelchair is attacked, and no one does anything until John Cena appears. Sofía Méndez was only looking for help, but she was humiliated and assaulted by ruthless guards. The situation spirals out of control until the wrestling icon steps in. How did this shocking confrontation end? Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The automatic doors of the shopping mall trembled with the echo of a deep, commanding voice. John Cena, standing in the heart of the main hallway, stared intently at the two security guards who, just seconds ago, had felt like they owned the place. Now, their confidence wavered under the imposing shadow of the wrestler. "Give her some space. Right now." His voice was low, but it carried an undeniable authority. The guards, two burly men in dark uniforms with tense faces, exchanged glances. One of them, the taller one, frowned and crossed his arms. "This isn't your problem, Cena. Stay out of it." But it already was. John Cena had seen too much. How had it come to this? Why was he even here in the first place? The woman in the wheelchair, barely a hunched shadow between the uniformed giants, struggled to catch her breath. Her hands trembled on the armrests of her chair, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and indignation. Her black hair fell messily over her face, partially hiding a fresh bruise on her left cheek. "The only thing I see here," Cena said, stepping forward, "is two guys abusing their badge. And I'm not going to let that keep happening." The older guard clenched his fists. "This woman has been causing trouble. We have orders to remove her." Cena tilted his head slightly, never breaking eye contact with the guards. Trouble? For who? Silence took hold of the air for a moment. The woman in the wheelchair, her voice shaky, finally spoke. They say I'm bothering the customers. But all I did was ask for help." Her gaze turned to Cena, searching for some sign of understanding. "My car broke down in the parking lot and my phone ran out of battery. I just wanted to call someone." How had a simple request for help escalated into a confrontation of this magnitude? Why were the guards reacting with such aggression? John Cena closed his eyes for a second, holding back his anger. Then he opened them again, his gaze cold as steel. "So instead of helping her, you decided to intimidate her." The older guard let out a sarcastic laugh. "Rules are rules. We have the right to escort anyone we want off the premises." Cena exhaled slowly. He knew how these types operated. He knew what it felt like to see someone vulnerable being trampled by those who were supposed to protect them. And he knew exactly what he had to do next. "If you touch this woman again," he said in a chillingly calm voice, "I'll make you understand what it feels like when someone bigger than you decides to abuse their power." The shopping mall was silent. Customers watched from a distance, some recording with their phones, others whispering among themselves. A hum of tension hung in the air. Would the guards dare to challenge Cena? Or would they back down in his presence? The taller guard took a step forward, but his partner stopped him with a gesture. He looked at Cena with an expression that wavered between anger and caution. "This isn't over." John Cena didn't look away. "No, it's not." The sound of police sirens shattered the tension. Someone had made the call. Would this be enough to bring justice? The situation was far from resolved, but one thing was certain. The woman in the wheelchair was no longer alone. And John Cena was there to make sure justice was heard. John Cena entered the mall without prior notice, accompanied by a couple of assistants and a staff member from the charity store. His presence caused an immediate stir among customers and employees, but he handled the situation naturally, greeting those who approached him with enthusiasm. Inside the charity store, he took the time to talk with the workers and volunteers. He listened attentively to their experiences and showed interest in the impact the organization had on the lives of children with disabilities. Between signing autographs and taking a photo with a group of employees, Cena looked up for a moment and noticed something unusual in the distance. A few meters from the store entrance, a woman in a wheelchair was speaking with two security guards. It did not seem like a casual conversation. One of the guards had his arms crossed, while the other gestured impatiently. The woman, on the other hand, maintained a tense expression and spoke insistently. Cena could not hear the words, but the rigidity in the guard's movements and the woman's defensive posture indicated that something was not right. As he continued his activity in the store, his eyes kept drifting back to the scene. The guards did not seem willing to help her. Instead, their body language suggested they were trying to get rid of her. Cena frowned, feeling a growing unease. He did nothing yet, but his attention remained fixed on what was happening. Sofía Méndez was 28 years old and had been living with a disability that had completely changed her life for the past 3 years. 3 years earlier, a car accident had left her paraplegic, forcing her to adapt to a completely different reality. At first, recovery was difficult. She spent months in rehabilitation, facing not only the physical limitations, but also the emotional impact of relying on others for tasks she had once performed effortlessly. Over time, she learned to move independently and regained confidence in herself. She learned to drive an adapted car and resumed her daily activities without expecting help from anyone. She got used to dealing with the stares of strangers and the lack of accessibility in many places. Although it was not always easy, she made an effort to move forward without depending on others. That day, Sofía had gone to the mall to do some shopping. Everything was going fine until, when she tried to start her car in the parking lot, it did not respond. She checked her phone and found that the battery was completely drained. With no way to call someone for help, she decided to look for assistance inside the building. She moved her wheelchair to the entrance and approached the security guards. She knew that in many places, they were not always willing to assist her, but she trusted that at the very least, they could direct her to where she could find help. However, she did not expect the reaction she would receive. Sofía moved forward in her wheelchair toward the security area of the mall. 2 guards were talking next to a desk. She stopped in front of them and, in a polite tone, explained her situation. "Excuse me, my car won't start, and my phone battery is dead. Could you help me contact someone?" The guards exchanged looks and, without hiding their annoyance, one of them responded indifferently. "We're not a roadside assistance service," he said, crossing his arms. "Go find someone else." Sofía frowned, surprised by their attitude. "I just need to make a call, or for you to tell me where I can get help." "I don't think that's a problem." The second guard sighed impatiently. "We're not here to solve personal problems. Besides, you can't be hanging around here bothering people." Sofía felt a knot in her stomach. "I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just asking for a little help." The first guard, who seemed the most hostile, leaned toward her with an annoyed expression. "Look, a lot of families with kids come here. It's not a good look for someone like you to be going around asking for favors." Sofía looked at him in disbelief. "Excuse me? You heard me," the guard said in a sharp tone. "Some customers might feel uncomfortable, so do us a favor and leave." Sofía's patience ran out. "I'm not begging for money or doing anything wrong. I just need help." The guard's expression hardened. "I'm telling you to leave. We don't want any trouble." Sofía held her ground. She couldn't understand how they could treat her this way just for asking for help. But something in the guard's eyes made her realize that the situation could get worse. One of the guards stepped forward and pointed to the exit. "We warned you. That's enough. Leave." Sofía gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. "You have no right to kick me out. I'm just asking for help." The more aggressive guard clicked his tongue impatiently. "So you don't get it? Fine. Let's make this easy." Without warning, he crouched down and released the brakes on her wheelchair. Before Sofía could react, the guard gave the chair a slight push backward. The sudden movement made her lose stability. Her body tilted, and for a moment, she felt like she might fall. With a quick effort, she managed to hold onto the armrests, but fear paralyzed her. "Help!" she screamed desperately. The sound of her voice echoed through the mall corridor. Several nearby people turned their heads, surprised. Some pulled out their phones. Among the crowd, a tall and muscular figure caught sight of the scene. John Cena frowned and stopped walking. In a matter of seconds, he understood what was happening. Without hesitation, he stepped forward with firm strides toward the group. The murmurs among the witnesses grew louder. Some recognized Cena immediately and moved out of his way. The guards still hadn't noticed his presence. Sofía was trying to regain control of her chair, breathing heavily. Cena reached them, and his voice rang out with authority. "What's going on here?" John Cena stopped in front of the guards, blocking their access to Sofía. His expression was serious, and his gaze was firm. "What's going on here?" he asked in a controlled voice, but with a tone that demanded an answer. The guards looked at each other. The one who had released the wheelchair brakes frowned and crossed his arms. "This is none of your business," he replied without hesitation. "This woman cannot stay here." Cena remained calm, but his stance became even firmer. "I see you're harassing her. She's just asking for help." Another guard scoffed in frustration. "Look, sir, we don't want any trouble. But she can't be here bothering the customers." Sofía, still recovering from the scare, raised her voice. "I'm not bothering anyone. I just need someone to help me get to my car." Cena listened to her and then fixed his gaze back on the guards. "Leave her alone," he said in a more severe tone. "I won't say it again." The guards ignored him and stepped closer to Sofía. "You have no authority here," one of them snapped. "So, if you don't want to get into trouble, step aside." Cena didn't move. His presence commanded respect, and the witnesses observing the scene had already started recording with their phones. "You're the ones with a problem," he warned. "And I suggest you think carefully before taking this any further." One of the guards stepped forward, pointing at Cena with his finger. "We're following management's orders. This woman cannot stay here." Cena crossed his arms without stepping aside. "Where are those orders in writing?" he asked firmly. "Where does it say that a person in a wheelchair can't ask for help in this mall?" The guards looked at each other, not responding immediately. "We don't have to explain anything to you," one of them grumbled. "If you don't step aside, we'll call the police." Cena didn't flinch. "Go ahead," he said. "But make sure that when they arrive, they see exactly what you're doing." Around them, more people had begun recording with their phones. Some store employees had come out to watch the scene, murmuring among themselves. "I've seen these guys do the same thing before," a food court worker whispered. "They always go after people they think can't defend themselves." The guards noticed that the crowd's attention was on them and that the phone cameras were capturing every detail. Despite this, they held their defiant stance. "Last warning," one of them insisted. "Either you step aside, or we call the police for obstruction." Cena tilted his head slightly. "Call them," he replied. "It'll be interesting to see who ends up in handcuffs when they watch the videos." The murmurs among the onlookers grew louder. The tension in the air increased with every passing second. As the argument escalated, a mall employee cautiously approached Cena. He glanced at the guards before leaning in toward him. "These guys have done this before," he whispered. "It's not the first time they've harassed someone vulnerable." Cena kept his eyes on the guards but listened closely to every word. "Do you have proof?" he asked in a low voice. The employee nodded. "There aren't any videos because they always know how to avoid the security cameras, but there are multiple complaints from customers and employees. Every time someone reports them, the head of security covers it up. He has a strict policy about the mall's image. He wants everything to look good, and that means getting rid of people he considers problematic." Cena frowned. "You mean people with disabilities?" The employee swallowed hard and nodded. "Not just that. They also remove elderly people who are alone and anyone who seems out of place." Cena looked around. People were still recording, and the guards, though maintaining their defiant stance, seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. "If that's true," Cena said loudly, "then we're not just dealing with abuse of authority. This is systematic discrimination." Silence fell over the scene. Some onlookers exchanged outraged looks. The guards hardened their expressions, but they no longer seemed as confident. Cena took a step forward. "This doesn't end here." Cena looked directly at the guards and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "We already know what's going on here. This isn't the first time you've harassed someone vulnerable. There are previous complaints against you." The guards tensed. One of them stepped forward. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said firmly. "We're just following orders. Orders to discriminate and mistreat people." Cena shot back. The crowd surrounding them moved closer. Some murmured in outrage. The cell phone cameras continued recording every second. One of the guards scowled and looked around, realizing the situation was slipping out of their control. "We don't have to argue with you," he said, trying to keep his composure. "This woman was causing trouble, and we acted according to mall regulations." Sofía raised her voice. "I just asked for help. I was stranded in the parking lot, and instead of helping me, they attacked me." The murmurs among the customers grew louder. Cena gestured toward the onlookers. "Everything is on video. You can't cover it up this time." At that moment, the sound of sirens echoed at the entrance. 2 police officers walked into the mall. One of the witnesses quickly approached them. "We called because these guards assaulted a disabled woman. We have videos." One of the officers looked at the guards, then at Cena. "Can you explain what happened here?" Cena nodded. "These men abused their authority. They tried to throw Sofía out without reason and even put her in danger by releasing the brakes on her wheelchair. There's plenty of evidence." The officers exchanged glances. "We want to see the videos," one of them said. Several witnesses showed their phone recordings. As they reviewed the footage, the guards remained silent. The officer turned to them. "You're going to have to come with us." The guards tried to protest, but the pressure from the crowd and the video evidence left them with no arguments. The police began taking statements while the witnesses ensured that the truth would come to light. Cena looked at Sofía. "You're not alone in this." She nodded with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was standing up for her. The officers finished reviewing the videos and testimonies. One of them looked at the guards and spoke firmly. "There is enough evidence to proceed with your arrest." The guards tried to defend themselves. "We were just doing our job." The officer interrupted them. "Your job does not include abusing customers." He ordered them to step forward, and after a brief instruction, they were handcuffed. The crowd watched in silence. Some customers applauded discreetly. At that moment, the head of security arrived, visibly agitated. "What is going on here?" One of the officers addressed him. "These men have been reported for harassment and mistreatment. There is also information about other complaints against them. We will need you to accompany us for an internal investigation." The head of security tried to object. "There is no mistreatment policy here." Cena stepped forward. "That's not true. I've spoken to employees who say otherwise." The head of security was left speechless. He knew there was no way to cover up what had happened. The officers escorted the guards out of the mall, while the head of security received instructions to appear for questioning. Sofía felt a relief she hadn't experienced in a long time. She turned to Cena. "Thank you for not leaving me alone." Cena smiled at her. "No one deserves to be treated like that." Some mall employees approached Sofía. "We're sorry for what happened. This shouldn't have happened. If you need anything, we're here to help." The mall manager also stepped forward. "I will review all previous complaints against the security team. We won't allow something like this to happen again." Sofía nodded. "That's all I want." If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more inspiring content. Share this video with friends and family who need to see stories that challenge perspectives and leave an indelible mark. Explore our channel to discover stories that inspire and transform. Until the next video. John Cena placed a hand on her shoulder. "If you need help with anything else, let me know. I'll make sure this doesn't get forgotten." Sofía looked around. The people who once ignored her were now offering their support. Not only had she regained her dignity, but she had also made it clear that no one had the right to treat her as if she were worth less than anyone else. John Cena stayed with her for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. He had proven that true strength does not lie in violence, but in protecting those who cannot defend themselves.